East Coast hip hop college kids, West Coast hip hop politics, Midwest hip hop coalition, Dirty South, go and get it.
For my project, I researched Martin Luther King Jr. and the impact he made during the civil rights movement, focusing closely on his home region of Georgia and the rest of the South, as well as his influence on hip-hop as a whole. Raised in Atlanta, King was a well-liked and admired kid. He attended Booker T. Washington High School and Morehouse College, and further continued his education by enrolling in Crozer Theological Seminary, where he was valedictorian of his class and student body president. In 1954, a year after his marriage to Coretta Scott, King became pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama at age 25. King's faith was strongly based in Jesus' commandment of loving your neighbor as yourself, loving God above all, and loving your enemies, praying for them and blessing them. On March 2, 1955, a 15-year-old girl, Claudette Colvin, refused to give up her seat to a white man on a Montgomery City bus, a violation of local law. Again, on December 1, 1955, a 42-year-old Rosa Parks was arrested and fined when refusing to give up her seat on the Cleveland Avenue bus. That same night, King and other civil rights activists met to plan a citywide bus boycott. King was elected to lead the boycott because he was young, educated, well-trained, and had family connections. Although the bus boycott suffered through 382 days of harassment and violence at the African American community, the city of Montgomery lifted the law mandating segregated public transportation. With a victory behind him, King, along with other ministers and civil rights activists, founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an effort to harness moral authority and organize the power of black churches to conduct nonviolent protests for civil rights reform. Although King experienced many obstacles, King persevered. King believed that, if anything, the media coverage of these organized, nonviolent protests against Southern segregation would lead to sympathetic public opinion that could convince the majority of Americans that the civil rights movement was the most important issue of the 1960s. On August 28, 1963, 250,000 people participated in the March of Washington, standing in the shadow of the Lincoln Memorial while listening to King give his historic "I Have a Dream" speech, emphasizing his belief that someday all men can be brothers. This march sparked both awareness and questioning of the Jim Crow laws and the second-class treatment of African Americans throughout the nation, especially in the South. Assassinated on April 4, 1968, while standing on a balcony at the Lorraine Motel, King left a seismic impact on race relations in the United States. Although the struggle for African Americans continued throughout the nation even after his death, King paved the path for equal human rights. Even today, King continues to inspire and influence many individuals, including in the work of hip-hop. Although not from the South, KRS-One writes in his book, The Gospel of Hip Hop, "As hip-hop scholars, our study of love begins at August 28, 1963, when our king, the true king, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., stood before the world in Washington, D.C. Our king, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in the midst of war, injustice, and poverty, saw the coming of a new raceless, classless, unified nation built upon the timeless principles of freedom, justice, and equality. He saw the beginnings of what we now call hip-hop. Our king spoke to us into existence. He spoke to and for the generation of his immediate children, those born between the years 1960 and 1970. This generation is the group that would eventually produce hip-hop. As prophecy, the king's "I Have a Dream" decree calls a new people and a nation into existence. And because he was speaking to the future of those youths, us, born between 1960 and 1970, Generation X, who became pioneers of the modern hip-hop and instinctively created the alternative, multicultural, multiracial, omni-faith community that the king predicted, we have realized today that we are the true citizens of the nation Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. dreamt about. Hip-hop is the promised land. KRS-One explains that the way people dress, model, dance, act, and sing capture the intentions of the king. Lastly, KRS-One says that this gospel is for the seriously committed hip-hop scholar who has not forgotten the words of the king. So, who are these committed hip-hop scholars whom King influenced in his impact region of the South? One of the most central states dealing with racism at the time was Mississippi. Big Crit is one hip-hopper who has been influenced by MLK, born and raised in Meriden, Mississippi. In an interview with All Hip Hop, Big Crit said, "I feel like music has definitely bridged the gap between generations, opened a lot of eyes, given a lot of different people voices and gave me the opportunity to explain why I was raised like this, but I don't even feel that way. It just brings a lot of depth to human interaction. Music is a big influence, and actually being able to go back and look at Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and a lot of people that were like, we need change. A lot of artists go back and listen to their speeches and a lot of writings and interviews and get motivated, like, I need to do more than just rap for myself in whatever city I'm from. I need to be rapping for everybody and trying to make music that's overall special. As a proud citizen of the South, Big Crit advocates for the same rights MLK did 40 years earlier. In his song, Children of the World, he sings,
yeah, cause we just, and they wonder why we bang, cause the police do the same. That's the only rival gang. I'm just sitting here praying to my father, tired of the day, forever scared of tomorrow was a scale I could borrow, cause living ain't cheap. I dropped out of school, pops, cause college ain't free, plus college ain't me.
Just like MLK said in his 1963 I Have a Dream speech,
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
I think that in a similar way, Big Crit has a vision for the children of the world getting out of the streets and onto a better path. The next artist is David Banner, born and raised in Jackson, Mississippi, known for being a vocal lyricist and speaker. Often controversial, Banner believes that rap music has been unfairly singled out as a scapegoat for deeper social problems. In the court hearing, From Emis to Industry, Banner argued, I can admit there are some problems in hip-hop, but it is only a reflection of what's taking place in our society. Hip-hop is sick because America is sick. His song lyrics reflect this opinion too. Banner believes that although MLK made great strides in the fight for civil rights, there is still work to be done, a perfect example of which being the recent police brutality controversies. 50 years earlier, MLK was also speaking to police brutality, saying, we can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of an unspeakable horrors of police brutality. In response to visiting Ferguson, Banner wrote the song Evel Knievel.
Oh, POs, they're about to shut down. I was on my way to heaven, then I stopped and turned around. The government, yeah, it did shut down. I was on my way to heaven, but I stopped and turned around for my people. My people. I try to never leave you. This is a war against evil. Knievel.
I'm a pain, you can't wash away these stains. You can't soak me in a tub full of bleach and brighten the shadows you left on my past, or whiten those dark stones you placed on my path. Where is the love? Mentally institutionalized by a nation plotting our demise. Sickness is created for our numbers to be cut. Love is like you staring at us with your eyes wide shut, wide shut.
This theme of acceptance of discrimination in Banner's work is paralleled in MLK's Where Do We Go From Here speech in 1967. He said, discrimination is a hellhound that gnaws at the Negroes in every waking moment of their lives to remind them that the lie of their inferiority is accepted as truth in the society dominating them. Banner also explains that the root of the problem in the U.S. originates back to slavery, similar to MLK beliefs too. In the first few opening lines of MLK's I Have a Dream, he says,
But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition.
In Banner's song, Something Is Wrong, he says,
Mr. President, you know that some people still racist. Jimmy Carter said it, you didn't have to underplay it. But I guess you got a plan. Police are still killing our young black man. I met young black men. It's less of us at college and more us in the pen. In the pen, I guess it's the devil's den. You ain't tripping, you alright. It's more of our friends that's dying in these streets, so I'ma die over this beat. If I die off in these streets, then I'ma let the blood leak. Whisper, God forgive me. Then bury me in the creeks of Mississippi, and I'ma take the whole.
From Birmingham jail in 1963, he writes, "Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed." By speaking out and spreading lyrics such as these, he was doing just that. Killer Mike was born in Atlanta, Georgia, a city New York Times named the center of hip-hop gravity in 2009. Although his name may cause one to think otherwise, he is one of the most conscious rappers in music. In an interview with Billboard in 2014, he said, "I will use my camera, my pen, my pad, and my network to do my part to make sure that Americans will no longer fear their government or its employees." Killer Mike has applied lessons taught by MLK to his own life, but he doesn't let the hype that surrounds the king get in the way of what is reality. In an interview, he said, "I think that in this country we love the nostalgic stories of how far we've come in transforming, and we have not. If we don't remain vigilant about these things, we never will." Killer Mike continues to stay vigilant through his lyrics. He references MLK in his songs Don't Die.
I've been labeled outlaw, renegade villain. So was Martin King, so the system had to kill him. A nigga with an attitude, the world gotta feel him. Educated villain, intent don't.
In his song, he talks about how the government tries to incriminate anyone who has tried to challenge the power structure. In response to that, I think MLK would say something similar to what he said in his 1961 speech to NYU. Human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle, the tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. There is no question that MLK influenced the South. He spoke to many themes, including the black right to vote, desegregation, and labor rights. Assassinated at the early age of 39, his legacy has been picked up by people like these hip-hoppers who speak out to end discrimination on both the music and the people.